Okay, getting everything set up and ready to go. Today I'm doing an episode of The Cut. Sounds good on D Live. Going in, making sure The Cut is set up. And on YouTube, got to make sure that's set to live streams and listen to the audio. Okay, so I have that set up. It sounds good on YouTube. I have to go and pull up the notes. I forgot to get my notes for today's topic. And after I get that, I should be ready to go. Yes. Let me see what we got here now. This is the second episode, so it's actually pretty cool. I after I get to where I need to go. Actually, I'm on the wrong part. Get back to where I need to go. And then I can start the show. Okay. So I'm gonna open my soda real quick, and then I'll take a drink because I want to not do the coffee thing right now. All right, and then I'll do my countdown and the introduction, and I do that for editing purposes so that everybody knows. Um, so here we go. Three, two, one, now. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the wonderful world of weirdness. I'm Roger Hanson, and today I will be your host for another episode of The Cut. Last week, we started out by talking about Amerigo Vespucci, and before I get started in that, I do want to apologize for uh, having a hard time saying his name at the beginning of last week's stream or that stream. Um, don't know why. It's just I have this real bad issue about pronouncing words, and it just happens. And again, I apologize about that. Now, I was able to do that show and get it done. And this week, I wanted to go further with that. This is where I want to go into the plume serpent. Now, that is actually a pretty good topic that I want to cover. I'm wanting to look at it from a linguistics point of view. So that's basically what I'm going to do. I found out in a lot of my research here that it's pretty sad when it comes to the linguistics for the Mayan people. A lot of their their language has been pretty much destroyed, lost to history because of the Spanish conquest. And I decided, I'm gonna I'm gonna see how this works out with linguistics and see what I can find. So that is what I'm going to do here. So with that, I am going to stop talking and just uh, start putting what I have so far out there for you guys to listen to. See what you think about it. So here we go. The plume serpent. The concept of a divine and supernatural serpent, particularly one associated with feathers or flight, has been central to various indigenous cultures throughout Mesoamerica and South America. Often mythologized as a plumed serpent, this archetype can be seen in different cultural expressions, cosmologies, and linguistics artifacts. While the better-known representations appear in Central Mesoamerican civilizations, like those in the Maya and the Mexica, similar symbolic motifs and linguistic patterns emerge in the northern region of South America. These patterns offer important clues when analyzing names like Ma'ara, which may encode deep layers of cosmological or spiritual meaning. In examining the possible roots and structure of the name Ma'ara, we must consider a set of language families that were prominent in the region from pre-Columbian times through the era of early European contact. These families include the Arawakan, Caribbean, Tupian, and Chibchan groups, all of which shared territorial or boundaries in modern day Venezuela, Colombia, Guyana, and northern Brazil. Each family had its own internal diversity of languages and dialects, but they also exhibited enough shared features and phonological tendencies to make comparative analysis possible. By exploring the morphological and semantic tendencies of these languages, we can better understand how the name Ma'ara might function and what it may have signified. Starting with the Arawakan language, which included tongues like Wayu, Gajiru, and the extinct Caquetío, we find a strong structural fit for the name Ma'ara. These languages often utilize open syllables with consonant vowels pairing, forming a foundation of word roots. In this context, or in this, oh, sorry, in this context, a root like ma'a, M-A-A, could possibly refer to an animate or elemental force, particularly since vowel lengthening seen in the repeated vowel of AA was a known mechanism for emphasis or sacred reference. The suffix "ra" in Arawakan or Arawakan speech frequently serves as a nominal or locative function, suggesting association, place, or origin. Thus, Ma'ara, M-A-A-R-A, in this context may mean place of Ma'a, M-A-A, or that which belongs to Ma'a, with Ma'a potentially representing a spiritual entity or natural force, perhaps even a serpent-like being associated with water, wind, or transformation. Arawakan languages also frequently used similar constructions in naming spirits, locations, or cosmological elements. Many place names and theonyms within Wayu culture, for example, contain similar patterns of root plus suffix, and the layering of meaning through both phonetic repetition and morphological tagging is consistent with Ma'ara's shape. While there is no direct evidence of Ma'ara referencing explicitly to a plumed serpent in surviving Wayuu or Coquito sources, the phonological structure supports the possibility of such a sacred or symbolic reference. Caribbean languages, which were spoken across large areas of northern South America and are still spoken in parts of Suriname and Venezuela, also provide instructive framework. An instructive framework. These languages typically employed consonant-vowel-consonant (CVC) and consonant-vowel (CV) syllable patterns, and while they showed less reliance on vowel elongation than Arawakan languages, they maintain a clear morphological structure that can accommodate a name like Ma'ara. Roots in Caribbean often consisted of two syllables and suffixes such as "ra", "na", or "ka", "ra", "na", "ka", which were used to indicate place, origin, or function. A name like Ma'ara within a Caribbean structure might therefore translate as "place of the Ma", Ma, or "spirit center of Ma", or "spiritual center of Ma. Again, the interpretation of Ma'a, M-A-A, in this setting is subject to speculation, but it could feasibly refer to an elemental or animistic being. Caribbean cosmologies did include animistic deities and natural spirits, and while the serpent figure was not always rendered in the same terms as the Mesoamerican plumed serpent, the notion of a sacred animal or transforming spirit was not alien. The idea that Ma'ara could reference a sacred or powerful place associated with such an entity is consistent with Caribbean naming conventions. Tupian languages, which dominate large portions of the Amazon basin but also touched areas near the Caribbean through trade and migration, offer yet another compelling linguistic environment in which Ma'ara could have arisen. These languages favor simple syllables and make extensive use of reduplication or vowel repetition to convey emphasis, plurality, or spiritual power. The root Ma'a, M-A-A, fits naturally within these structures or structural rules, and suffixes like Ra, Ta, and Na, R-A-T-A, and N-A, are known to denote location or abstraction in various branches of the Tupian family. Within Tupian cosmology, names often contain references to animals, celestial bodies, and transformative natural forces, while specific reference to a plumed serpent are scarce. While specific reference to a plumed serpent are scarce in Tupian mythology compared to Mesoamerican myths, There are ample examples of serpentine deities, river spirits, and sky beings that embody similar dualities of earth and sky. Therefore, a name like Ma'ara could plausibly mean living presence, embodied force, or place of being in a Tupian linguistics context, with a possible spiritual connotation depending on how Ma'a, M-A-A, is locally interpreted. This interpretation, though broader, allows room for a symbolic or totemic figure like a plumed serpent. Let me get back here, that way I can be able to watch what I'm doing. Now, Chibchan languages, centered more in the mountain regions of Colombia, Panama, and parts of Venezuela, display the most variability in phonological structure. Unlike the relatively simple syllables of Arawakan or Tupian tongues, Chibchan languages make greater use of consonant clusters and often include more complex morphological rules. However, certain variations of Chibchan still employ straightforward consonant-vowel syllables, especially in place-naming conventions. Suffixes like "ra", "ra", or "wa", "wa", are not uncommon and can be used to indicate locations, position, or essence. In Chibchan, the root "ma'a", M-A-A, might connote ideas like mother, water, or foundation, depending on the dialect. Thus, Ma'ara could translate into something like mother's place or source place, depending on the specific context. Given the importance of serpentine figures in water mythology across the Americas, a root associated with mother or water could easily be extended metaphorically to a serpent figure, especially one who is regarded as a guardian or channeler of energy between realms. Each of these language families provide a plausible morphological and semantic structure for the name Ma'ara. In many cases, we see a consistent possibility that Ma'a could signify a natural force, spirit, or sacred identity, while Ra provides a spatial or existential function. The fact that this combination makes linguistic sense across multiple unrelated families suggests it could represent a common conceptual type in the region's indigenous worldviews. Furthermore, the repetition of the vowel or the elongation of the root in ma'a, M-A-A, points to an intensification or sanctification, reinforcing the possibility that the name signified something more than a mere personal name. It could have been cosmologically or ritually loaded. The symbolic presence of serpents in indigenous cultures across the Americas further supports the hypothesis that a word like Ma'ara could be related to a sacred serpent, even without invoking the later mythologized figures known as the Central American known in the Central American context. The widespread appearance of snake spirits, river guardians, and transformation beings in Amazonian, Caribbean, and Andean traditions suggests that the serpent archetype was deeply rooted in native belief systems. This being, these beings were often liminal, connecting sky and earth, water and fire, death and rebirth. As such, they were perfect metaphors for cosmic cycles and spiritual transformation. In considering all of this, it becomes clear that Ma'ara is not simply a name floating in isolation. It reflects a deeper, older system of thought in which language, nature, and spirituality were ultimately intertwined. The shared the shared morphological structures across language families, despite their different genetic language lineages, hint at broad regional conceptions of place, power, and being. These shared features may not stem from linguistic inheritance alone, but from prolonged contact, trade, and cosmological exchange among the people of this vast and interconnected region. While some might argue that Ma'ara, Maara, could just as easily be a colonial misinterpretation or transcription error, this linguistic breakdown suggests otherwise. The internal logic of the name corresponds well with indigenous naming conventions. It exhibits the features that one would expect from a sacred or symbolic name in any of the four major language families considered. Whether referring to a sacred being, a mythic ancestor, or a place of transformation, Ma'ara fits a recurring structural mold that was linguistically sound and culturally resonant across much of the pre-Columbian northern South America. If we return then to the initial question of whether Ma'ara might be linked to a plumed serpent archetype, the answer appears more nuanced than a simple yes or no. While we cannot definitively equate Ma'ara with the specific mythological figures of Mesoamerica, we can say with confidence that the linguistic structure of the word fits well within the traditions that gave rise to such beings. It reflects the naming strategies used for sacred spaces, divine entities, and transformative natural powers. And in a region where serpents were frequently charged with cosmic significance, the idea that Ma'ara might allude to such a being is well within the bounds of historical and linguistic possibility. The name Ma'ara serves as a compelling case study in how indigenous languages encode cosmology, sacred geography, and identity within compact, morphologically rich forms. By analyzing the name across four major language families, Arawakan, Caribbean, Tupian, and Chibchan, we gain a deeper appreciation for the semantic depth and structural elegance of indigenous naming conventions. The possible spiritual or mythic dimensions of the name remain open to interpretation, but its consistency with regional linguistic patterns strongly supports its authenticity as a meaningful native construction. Whether or not Ma'ara directly refers to a plumed serpent, it certainly embodies the kind of layered, symbolic naming that allowed ancient cultures to bind language to the forces that shape their world. The Spanish arrival on the northern coast of South America in the late 15th century marked the beginning of a profound and often violent transformation in the indigenous landscape. When Alonso de Ojeda arrived in the region known as Quequacoa, also spelled Quibuibacoa, Quequabacoa, and the original spelling was Quiquevacoa. He did not merely encounter a foreign geography, but a deeply inhabited world, rich with sacred meaning, cultural history, and linguistic depth. The indigenous people who resisted Ojeda's landing were not only defending their material territory, they were protecting the very structure of their cosmological identity. To understand why rebellion occurred in the wake of Vegeda's landing, one must look beyond the standard colonial narratives and delve into the profound symbolic and linguistic significance of the land that the Spanish sought to claim. Quetzalcoatl was not just a place name arbitrarily recorded by Spanish explorers. Linguistics analysis suggests it was deeply rooted in indigenous languages of the region, likely from the Arawakan family spoken by groups such as the Caquetio and Wayuu. By breaking the name Quetzalcoatl down into its potential root components, Keki, K-I-K-E, or Kiki, K-I-K-I, Va, V-A, or Wa, W-A, and Koa, C-O-A, or K-U-A, a clear picture begins to emerge. These components each carry distinct meanings in indigenous language. Kiki, K-I-K-I, often refers to walking or movement. Va or Wa, Va or Wa, can signify a collective people or a spirit place. And Koa or Kua, C-O-A, or K-U-A, frequently denotes location or grounding. Combined, these roots likely signify something akin to the place of sacred movement, land of those who journey, or region of the spirit people. This name alone indicates a profound relationship between the land and its people, a relationship that cannot be separated from its spiritual, cultural, and ancestral dimensions. When Alonso de Ojeda landed in this region in 1499, he was followed in the wake of Spanish expeditions driven by imperial ambitions, seeking to chart new lands, extract resources, and claim dominion for the Spanish crown. However, the methods employed by Ojeda and his men were far from peaceful. Contemporary reports and later chroniclers described his tactics as fearful and provocative. Indigenous populations were subjected to coercion, kidnapping, and demands for tribute. E- Even without full knowledge of Spanish intentions, the indigenous community of Quequavecoa would have quickly understood that these were not mere travelers. The Spanish were armed, assertive, and culturally alien, disrupting the balance of a sacred landscape. The rebellion that followed Ojeda's landing must therefore be seen as a deadly or deeply justified response, rooted in both cultural defense and spiritual necessity. To the people of Quequavecoa, Ojeda was not just an interloper, he was a defiler of sacred geometry. If, as the linguistic breakdown suggests, Quiquavecoa was considered a spiritual pathway or ceremonial land, then its defense was not simply strategic, it was a moral obligation. The Spanish were unknowingly violating a space whose meaning they could not comprehend. They were bringing not only weapons but a worldview that clashed irreconcilably with the indigenous perception of land, community, and the cosmos. This cultural misunderstanding, so common throughout the colonial era, was at the heart of the conflict. To the Spanish, claiming territory was a political and economical act. To the indigenous people of northern South America, land was not separable from identity, mythology, and history. In many Arawakan and Caribbean cultures, land was understood as a living being inhabited by spirits, shaped by ancestral deeds, and structured by ritual paths. The name Quequavecoa, preserved through the Spanish transcription, likely encoded some of these meanings. It is entirely plausible that this name was passed down through generations as part of an oral history that described the region's importance not only as a dwelling place, but as a spiritual nexus, perhaps even a boundary between worlds. Resistance, therefore, was not merely reactionary. It was an assertion of sovereignty on every level: territorial, spiritual, cultural, and historical. The rebellion against Ojeda may have been one of the earliest such acts in South America, but it fits into the long continuum of indigenous resistance across the continent. What makes the Quaquavecoa instance particularly poignant is that the region's very name suggests the presence of deep-rooted metaphysical knowledge, now obscured by centuries of colonization, but still partially recovered through linguistics and cultural study. Further evidence of the cultural integrity of the region can be found by analyzing other names and words from the era. The term Maracaibo, Maracaibo, another early Spanish transcription from the region, also appears to be derived from indigenous roots. Breaking it down into Ma'ara and Cabo, Caibo, and Maara and Cabo, Caibo, one might interpret the former as a root referring to a being or force, possibly even the plumed serpent archetype found throughout Mesoamerica and South American mythologies, and the latter as a suffix denoting place or relationship. This interpretation suggests that Maracaibo may once have referred to place of Ma'ara, or land of the sacred being, reinforcing the idea that this entire coastline was dense in cultural and spiritual meaning long before European contact. The pattern continues when examining the word Ma'ara itself. Root word analysis suggests that Ma'ara could connect with ideas of serpent, motion, or sacred force in multiple language families. In the Arawakan languages, root sounds like ma, M-A, mar, M-A-R, or ma'ar, M-A-A-R, often relates to water, spirits, or ancestral power. In Chibchan languages, similar phonemes appear in words associated with dwelling places or spirits or high-status individuals. Across these languages, meanings coverage no across these languages, meanings converge. Ma'ara may have denoted a powerful ancestral or spiritual presence, possibly even an abstracted deity or mythological figure associated with natural forces like water, wind, or cosmic energy. By contrast, Spanish interpretations of these names were often superficial, based on phonetic approximations rather than understanding. When the Spanish recorded the names of places like Quequabacoa or Maracaibo, they preserved the sound but not the soul of the world, or the word, but not the soul of the word. That loss of cultural depth is one of the most profound impacts of colonization. Not just the taking of land, but the erasure of the meaning behind the names, places, and practices that made up the indigenous world. The rebellion against Ojeda was not just a clash of swords, but a clash of cosmologies. Ojeda brought with him a European worldview that treated land as a commodity, names as labels, and people as subjects to be converted or conquered. The people of Quequabacoa responded with a very different place. No, from responded from a very different place. A world view where land was sacred, names were stories, and communities were guardians of something far older than any empire. In this view, rebellion was not just necessary, it was a sacred duty. Throughout the Americas, while many regions eventually fell under Spanish control, others remained fiercely autonomous. The Wayuu people, for example, famously resisted Spanish colonization throughout the entire colonial period, and their language and customs survive to this day. Their resilience is a testament to the strength of indigenous cosmology and the cultural importance of sacred places like Quequevacoa. In considering these acts of resistance, it is vital to remember that the indigenous people were not primitive or irrational. They were responsible to uh, they were responding to invasion with strategies informed by their own political systems, spiritual beliefs, and historical experience. The Spanish mistook a lack of community like those around Quequevacoa were highly structured. No, mistook a lack of centralized kingship. Yeah, the Spanish mistook a lack of centralized kingship for a lack of organization. In reality, communities like those around Quequevacoa were highly structured, though in different ways than the Spanish understood. Leadership may have been clan-based, fluid, or ceremonial, but it was no less effective in mobilizing people to defend their homes. The rebellion also exposed the limitation of European documentation. While Spanish records describe Ojita's journey and note the resistance he faced, they did not and cannot convey the full indigenous perspective. Much of what we can now recover must come from piecing together linguistics evidence, oral traditions, and archaeological clues. By examining the names and root words passed down through colonial transcription, we begin to uncover a deeper map, one not of coastlines and lineage, but of meaning, stories, and sacred geometries, or geographies, and sacred geographies. In the end, the Spanish would not hold Quequebacoa easily, if at all. The resistance Ojeda encountered was not an isolated act, but the beginning of a long and complex process of cultural confrontation. While European powers sought to impose broader and uh, borders, while European powers sought to impose borders and extract wealth, indigenous people fought to preserve their way of life and the sanctity of the lands they had inhabited for centuries. Today, as we reflect on these early encounters, we must move beyond the simplistic narratives of discovery and conquest. Places like Quequebacoa deserve to be remembered not just as a point on the map, but as living spaces to the remembered, no, to the, okay, how about, but as living spaces of indigenous memory and resistance. The rebellion that greeted Ojita's arrival should be honored as one of the first assertions of native sovereignty in the face of a colonial future. By returning to the indigenous root of the word, by listening to the echoes of the names, and by reading between the lines of colonial documents, we uncover a different history, one where land, language, and spirits are inseparable. This is the story that was almost lost, but which still speaks through names like Quequabacoa. And in that story, rebellion is not just a response, it is a form of remembering, a way of keeping the sacred alive. In the early period of European exploration, following Christopher Columbus's first voyage in 1492, few figures played a pivotal role in documenting the geography of the New World as Juan de la Cosa, a seasoned Spanish navigator and cartographer. De la Cosa was more than just a participant in several of the earliest voyages. He was a direct observer and recorder of lands previously unknown to Europeans. He holds the distinction of creating the earliest known map that depicts the Americas, completed in 1500, which stands as a key artifact in the history of cartography. Juan de la Cosa, or Juan de la Cosa's map, is significant not only for its age but for its origin. Unlike later European maps based on second-hand reports or letters, de la Cosa's work emerged directly from his own experiences. He was not a distant interpreter of events or a compiler of others' journeys. He sailed with Columbus on the first transatlantic voyage and later joined Alonso de Ojeda on a 1499 expedition to South America. During these voyages, he was responsible for piloting and navigation, placing him in a unique position to observe and record coastlines, inlets, and major geographic features. One of the most common misunderstandings in early exploration history is the assumption that de la Cosa relied heavily on information supplied by others such as Ojeda or Amerigo Vespucci. This is incorrect. De la Cosa and Ojeda were on the same ship, experiencing the same sights at the same time. Ojeda, a military man and explorer, was not trained in cartography or navigation. While he may have made verbal observations or offered strategic insights, it was de la Cosa who documented and interpreted the geography into a coherent cartographic form. Similarly, while Amerigo Vespucci is often cited as a major contributor to geographic understanding during this era, his primary legacy came from letters that were circulated in Europe, claiming discovery of lands not part of Asia. There is no verifiable evidence that Vespucci ever worked directly on maps, nor that his written observations were used in the technical sense by Juan de la Cosa. While Vespucci may have briefly joined the 1499 voyage with Ojeda and de la Cosa, any contributions he made were literally not cartographic. The notion that de la Cosa needed to be informed by Vespucci overlooks the reality that the mapmaker was already directly involved in the exploration and recording process. The 1500 map created by de la Cosa, known today as the Map of Juan de la Cosa, includes remarkable accurate depictions of the northern coast of South America and parts of Central America. This cartographic achievement came not from hearsay, but from de la Cosa's own logbooks, sketches, and navigational measurements. There is no indication that the map was shaped or corrected by any additional sources outside his own experiences and calculations. It is important to understand that de la Cosa's work predated the famous 1507 map of Martin Waldseemüller, which introduced the name America to the world. De la Cosa never used this name in his map, and the lands were simply illustrated without such labels. Waldseemüller's map, unlike de la Cosa's, was not based on first-hand experience. Instead, it relied heavily on the circulated letters attributed to Vespucci. Waldseemüller interpreted these narratives as evidence that the lands described were not Asia, but a new continent, prompting him to name the continent America in Vespucci's honor. This was a decision made from a European library. Not from the deck of a ship. While Waldseemüller's contributions to cartography is historically important, it was reflective of evolving scholarly opinions rather than geographical surveying. To return to Ojeda, there is also no evidence that he ever created or even commissioned a map himself. His role on the expedition was primarily martial and administrative. He led expeditions, negotiated with or confronted indigenous populations, and carried out the political aims of the Spanish crown. He did not have the training to engage in detailed measurements, angles, or coastal surveys necessary to compile a working map. Any geographical information associated with his voyages would have come through his ship's pilot, most often de la Cosa, or others charged with navigation. Therefore, it is inaccurate to attribute map-making knowledge to Ojeda or even to claim that Vespucci offered anything more than vivid descriptions of the lands he encountered or claimed to have encountered. It is more accurate to view Juan de la Cosa as an independent cartographic authority. His map is not a patchwork or hearsay or second-hand knowledge, but the result of empirical observation. The coastline that winds along the northern edge of South America on his map is proof of his first-hand contact with those shores. It is also important to consider the nature of early navigational work. Unlike modern maps based on satellite data, early charts were produced through dead reckoning, celestial observation, and direct coastal survey. Pilots like De la Cosa would have taken frequent latitude readings and sketched coastlines as they visually appeared. This means that maps like his are primary historical documents, not synthesized summaries of someone else's recollections. In fact, given the presence of compass roses, scale indicators, and geographical features consistent with real coastal forms, the map of 1500 demonstrates a sophistication unmatched by most of his contemporaries. In light of this, we should revise our understanding of the contributions to early New World cartography. Amerigo Vespucci, though famous and perhaps even crucial to the popular European imagination, did not create the maps himself. Ojeda did not contribute to their production in any direct sense. The only one of the three who both explored and documented the geography through actual maps was Juan de la Cosa. By centering our historical view on first-hand contributors rather than retrospective labeling or assumptions, we gain a more accurate picture of how the New World was discovered, charted, and ultimately recorded for posterity. Juan de la Cosa's work remains one of the clearest and most direct windows into that process. The map he left behind is not just a document, it is a navigational portrait painted by the hand of someone who was there on the water, charting the unknown. As we continue to examine the early decades of the Age of Discovery, recognizing who actually contributed which type of knowledge becomes or even more essential. As we continue to examine the early decades of the New Age of Discovery, recognizing who actually contributed which types of knowledge becomes ever more essential. Maps are not just collections of data, they are historical arguments. Juan de la Cosa's maps make one thing clear. He was not merely present during exploration, he was defining it. All right, that is the end of that. And I also want to point something else out about Juan de la Cosa. Juan de la Cosa also owned one of the ships that Christopher Columbus sailed across the Atlantic with. I believe it was the Maria. That was his ship. That is something that I thought was pretty interesting. So he wasn't just involved in mapping out the voyage that Amerigo Vespucci was involved with and gave given credit for when it comes to naming the Americas. But he was also the man who owned one of the three ships that discovered the New World, which makes it even more fascinating. And this is one more of those stories that just was cut. It wasn't even um, introduced into history as we understand it. Um, to this day, people are still taught that Amerigo Vespucci was the one who mapped this area out because of his great work. He deserved the name America or Amerigo Vespucci. America had to be named after him. When in fact, Juan de la Cosa was the one who actually mapped the coastlines and did all the work. So I wanted to bring that up on our next episode. It will not be about America, Amaraka, which is, by the way, an older debate that took place during this time period and after. Actually, it took place, I believe, in the 1800s. And like I said, this is a huge, huge rabbit hole, okay, that literally leads nowhere. But it is a very, very good story or it's something that's worth researching, because, well, for me, for example, I mean, I wouldn't have learned anything about Juan de la Cosa and him actually being the one who mapped out the coasts of America and actually being the one who made the first map. You know what I mean? I was one of those people who believed that Amerigo Vespucci was the one who did all of that, and that I didn't even know that a cartographer in Europe was the one who actually did it after the voyage. So I found this to be very, very interesting and enlightening when it comes to that. There's a lot of our history that was never told, and if it was told, it was usually a lie. So I do enjoy doing stuff like this. Now I got interested in the Dokubers, which is a group of people out of Russia. There's a person who I talked to called Svetlana on D Live, and she mentioned this in one of our chats with Mark Latashik, and I wanted to do research on them and find out about them. So I'm going to use that information on my next episode. So I hope you guys stick around, and I hope that you listen to this. This is actually a pretty interesting story. This is another one of those stories that slipped by the crack and they're cut. And that's one of the reasons why I made this series. This is what it's about. So hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, please like, subscribe, share, make comments, give comments in the comment section below. I really, really would love to hear from you, and I will do my best to respond to each and every one of you. I usually am good at responding. It doesn't have to be about the topic that we've done today. It can be just to stop by and say hello, you know what I mean? Anything. So, with that being said, I can tell you that we have streamed on Rumble, X, Twitch, Kick, YouTube, and D Live today. Um, I don't believe I have any comments at all on D Live or on Rumble, but I'm working to get on there and check. I forgot to put but yeah, nobody's checked it. Nobody's left a comment there. We have no comments on YouTube, and we have no comments on D Live other than Mark from Dregus Production. He left some messages for me the other day saying that I can I can stream or simulcast or restream his D Live on there because he's got music and stuff that he's got up. I appreciate that. And what I told him in the chat was I'd have to do it manually, though. I'm not as uppity up as what he is on D Live. He's got all those cool views and stuff like that. Not me, man. I only have like 27 followers. So yeah, I can do it, but it would have to be manually. Do appreciate him stopping by and making his comment. I'm gonna go over there and give him a lemon, and I'm gonna give DK Spiracy a lemon as well because I love handing out lemons. That's right, I'm the lemon guy. If you guys come in and you subscribe to me, I will give you lemons too because I am just that cool, guys. So, with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I hope you have a good day, good morning, evening, afternoon, whatever time it is for you in your part of the woods. And I will go ahead and end the stream and let you go. Thanks for watching.